Yes, you heard it correctly. The sounds of brackets being torn up and the screams of victory and defeat coming from all corners of the country. The NCAA tournament is off and running, and we break it all down today, right here on Locked On Women's Basketball.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, friends. It is March 24th, 2025, and it is a Monday. If you took a couple days off of work to kick that bug that much had you on the couch just so that you could maybe watch a little bit of basketball, I hope you're feeling better, but also that you took today off as well, because the madness of March is still running strong. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick, national correspondent and college basketball analyst. Welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. Thank you for joining us today. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Well, you can follow me at Missy Heidrick on the socials. Make sure you follow this podcast at Locked On WBB, and then come see all of my amazing colleagues over at The Next, www.thenexthoops.com. And that's where you will find everything you need to know about this year's 2025 NCAA tournament, as well as everything else going on in the world of women's basketball. Well, the 2025 NCAA tournament has not disappointed. And what those of us have been watching all season in the world of women's college basketball that might be new to others that have not paid so close attention, there are way too many good teams and way too many good players in this field of 68 to overlook anyone. Number one seeds are on a mission. 5 seeds are crashing the dance party. And we still have the final Sweet 16 dance card to be filled out today. We are bouncing all over the country to break it down. And to help me, my dear friend and colleague at The Next, and a man in the trenches as a coach himself in the women's game, Matthew Walter. Matthew, hello, my friend. Good morning to you. Let's work our way from the top down. All right, let's talk about the number one seeds first. 2 of them are still going to play today, and that is going to be USC out of Spokane 4, and then Texas out of the Birmingham 3 brackets. Let's talk about the 2 that have advanced into the Sweet 16 already. And we'll start with the number 1 overall seed in UCLA. Your thoughts on the Bruins? They advanced. They're into the Sweet 16. And I think Corey Close has this team on a mission. But they have had a few bumps in the road in those first 2 games in this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, credit to Richmond, right? Richmond was tied with UCLA at the half yet last night. The late night game for those on the East Coast. Good time game for us here on the West Coast. And you know, Richmond is a team that I think we were talking about a little bit before we started recording, right? The mid-majors, the ones at the top have found a way to compete, right? They blew Georgia Tech out of the water in their first game, and they came in ready. Maggie Dugan is probably one of the best players in the mid-major, one of the best players in the country, and she showed that last night. Early in the game, she was hitting threes. Lauren Betts wasn't closing out tight enough, and UCLA was in a dogfight. And then Corey Close talked about it after the game. They made some adjustments on how they were guarding some of the actions from Richmond, and that slowed their offense down. And the third quarter was all UCLA, 29-7. A lot of it was defense, but also they hit a lot of threes in that quarter. Kiki Rice got hot from 3. She's one of those players that when she spaces the floor and can shoot the ball well, that makes them really hard to guard because she is such an athletic player getting downhill the rim. And then Lauren Betts she went to work. She had 30 points and just was so dominant inside. They obviously, no one really has the size to match up with her, but you just saw a little better offensive flow from UCLA in that second half, especially that third quarter, throwing the ball in when she got doubled, kicking it back out, or when she got in and she got those one-on-ones with some digs where she had some space. She went to work, and she has such great footwork in the post, her ability to step through, her ability to go around defenders and get to her finishes. And because she's so tall, right, she just keeps the ball high and it's an easy finish. But it was clearly some adjustments at halftime from UCLA, and they just were able to hit some of their shots in that third quarter, shoot them with confidence. You saw that. And then Lauren Betts just went to work, and that's why they're so good. If you can get Lauren Betts inside with touches and then kick out to shooters, they have Gardner, they have Rice, they have London Jones, and they just have so much versatility, especially from their bigs, right? We all know what Lauren Betts is. Janiah Barker comes off the bench and is just this athletic get downhill, aggressive big. You have Tamia Gardner, who comes off the bench and can shoot the snot out of the basketball at 6'2". That just is so much versatility from all three of their players that are over 6 feet tall. It changes how you guard them. They can throw different things at you offensively and defensively. And I just think that they made those adjustments at halftime, and they were able to hit their shots in the third quarter, and they blew the game out in that moment.
It's interesting because I had a conversation with a colleague of mine who lives and breathes in the Big Ten during the course of the season. And his statement to me was, watching UCLA in person, it felt like all of them could be defensive players of the year because of just how good that they are and how tenacious they have been on the defensive end of the floor. I think that feeds their offense. And we all know there's the old adage. It was the quote from the late, great Pat Summitt. And she said, offense sells tickets, defense wins championships, defense wins games, rebounding wins championships. And I think if you're UCLA, their ability to play defense and to rebound, because Lauren Betts can dominate the glass, is that just gives them an added boost. And then it can shut a team down instantaneously. Those adjustments you made, I think that's what happened to Richmond. And if I'm in that bracket in Spokane 1, I'm thinking we got to figure out a way to score against UCLA because they are just so good defensively.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a tough matchup. We talk about what's next, but you look at an Ole Miss team next who doesn't score the ball very well. They're another really good defensive team. That's going to be one of those grinded out type of games. We've seen a lot of those, especially yesterday in that second round. But it's hard because UCLA has so many weapons. They have so many different people who can do different things, right? Kiki Rice is a 3-level scorer. London Jones is a bombs away shooter. You've got, like I talked about, Barker and Gardner and Betts and Dugalich in the front court who all do different things. This team has 7 or 8, 9 weapons who can get double digits on any given day. And that was what makes them so dangerous. And, oh, by the way, they have probably the best center in the country in Lauren Betts, who can give you 30 and 14 like she did last night.
Yeah. All right. So let's go from West Coast to the East Coast. And the defending national champions, South Carolina, they advanced to the Sweet 16. They were pushed by Indiana, who had won their first round game against Utah in that 8-9 slot. As I always like to say, congratulations. It's like women's basketball purgatory. You win that 8-9 game, and then you get to play a number 1 seed on their home court. The Gamecocks were pushed. They win 64-53. Ultimately, as it has been all season for Dawn Staley, balance up and down that roster in a host of different ways. They can make those adjustments, that they can turn up the heat with their defense and their intensity. And I think this is also a group that's playing with a bit of a chip on their shoulder. They thought that they deserved the overall number 1. You listen to Dorita Dawkins, the chair of the Women's Basketball Committee, after Selection Sunday. That was 2 things. It was the head-to-head loss to UCLA, and then the 29-point loss that South Carolina had to UConn in the regular season. That's what put them at the second number 1. Regardless, number 1 seed took care of their business. They're in the Sweet 16. Your thoughts on the Gamecocks?
I think if you look at it, right, they won by 11, and a lot of people will be concerned. And I think there are some things in that first half that concern you, right? You're down by 1. You're just not, there was not a lot of it felt flowy. It didn't feel like the normal South Carolina stuff. And credit Indiana, right? They knew coming in what the game plan was. We're going to do certain things, try to take away the inside. And they have some of those advantages because they have some size with Yarden Garzone, with Caroline Striplin, with Lily Meister, who, Garzone is like 6'2" and shoots the 3 ball, and that's hard to guard. But I just think with South Carolina, Dawn Staley is one of the best coaches in the country in making adjustments. She's one of the best coaches in the country in motivating her group. If you are not in a solid, comfortable lead at halftime, especially at South Carolina, good luck winning the game.
Yeah.
And I think Indiana saw that, right? They were up 1 at half. The third quarter, they got outscored by 12 points.
Yeah.
That's where the game goes. Like, if you, against these really, really good teams, if you are not making the same level of adjustments at halftime and are just going to go, okay, well, it worked in the first half, so we need to be good. You're not going to win the game. Mm-hmm. And credit to South Carolina. They came back. They bounced back. They showed up in that third quarter and they punched them in the face. And that was enough to get the win. But I think it's a wake-up call. And I think if I saw something somewhere where they said, like, this is a wake-up call for us as a group. Like, we need to be better focused, better ready to go going into the Sweet 16. And now it only gets harder, right? Now you're going to get bigger teams and bigger name programs in front of you that you're going to have to beat. Now we're going to move to a neutral site, as neutral as Birmingham is for South Carolina. It's almost like playing the SEC championship. That's like, I don't know how far it is from South Carolina, but I assume it's not very far.
Not very, no.
Yeah. So for them, again, like they're going to keep playing. Again, the chip on their shoulder, I think, is there. I think sometimes you get to that second round and you have a short turnaround and you have to be able to just make those quick on the fly adjustments. And they did that at halftime, and they came on the third quarter and they punched them in the face and they got through it. And I think, they'll be ready for the next battle. But this is also a team that we talked about all year. They don't have like that star. Every year, the last years that they've won the championship, they've had Asia Wilson, they've had Aaliyah Boston, they've had Camila Cardoso. This group doesn't have that. And I'm just wondering, at what point does that finally maybe cause a problem? Right now, obviously it hasn't, because they're into the Sweet 16 and they've won a lot of games. But at some point, I think not having that go-to dominant, like, I know those are all post players, but just even having that star player, at some point that might catch up with them.
No, I think that's very valid. And I think it's a question that a lot of people have asked, because balance is amazing and it's fantastic. It's something that every coach would love to have, but sometimes you do need that one player that you can put the ball in their hands late in the game and they can go make a play. I think that would be a big question. You're going to see some of those on display here today, as Texas will look to advance into the Sweet 16 as the number one out of Birmingham 3. They take on Illinois. Madison Booker, one of the best sophomores in the country. And then you've got USC and you've got the other fantastic sophomore and Juju Watkins that will be going up against. They take on Mississippi State, who comes in as that 9 seed. They beat Cal in the first round. So that's the other number ones they will be looking to move on today. All right. In just a moment, some of the toughest things to pick in a bracket in the round of 32 are those 4-5 seed lines. And so Matthew and I, we've got all sorts of thoughts for you folks. And so we're going to talk about it in just a second. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lockdown Women's Basketball. Thank you for joining us here on a Monday. Games still in progress. Tickets still to be punched for the Sweet 16 in the women's bracket. But what we have already had coming out of 3 regions, or so far, has been some fantastic matchups, Matthew, of 4-5 games. Ones that I sometimes feel are some of the toughest to pick, because these are usually very even in what it is. And those teams that are on those 5 lines in these brackets, they were the ones that were crossing their fingers, hoping they could maybe hold on to a 4 to be able to play at home. Instead, they've got to go on the road and they've got to try to upset somebody, so to speak, on their home court. Let's start in Spokane 1. You mentioned it earlier. The team that will take on UCLA now in the Sweet 16, Ole Miss. They beat Baylor 69-63 in Waco. They had just 6 points in the second quarter, but a balanced box score. And they caused 21 turnovers by Baylor in that game. Your thoughts on the Rebels advancing and making it into the Sweet 16?
Playing Ole Miss is like trying to fight your way out of a brick house. It's hard, it's physical, and it hurts. And that is what Coach Yo is. She is going to catch you a team that is going to physically make your life difficult on defense. On offense, they have their moments, right? Sometimes they look great. They score 20 in 3 quarters, but then they have quarters where they score 6. But defensively, they are going to make you work every possession on offense. And that is what makes them so good. And that's why they win games on the road, right? 2 years ago, they beat Stanford on the road at Stanford as the number 1 overall seed. Yeah. They won on the road in this game because their defense travels. We talk about it. You don't need to take offense can be hit or miss on the road. Defense doesn't need anything different on the road. You just got to play with energy. That's what this team does. They get big shots from big players. Madison Scott hit a big shot late in the game in a situation that she may or may not have gotten fouled. KK Deans hit all 6 of her free throws late in the game. And this is just a very veteran group. But for Ole Miss, their leading scorer yesterday was a freshman that got put in the starting lineup, incredibly athletic, Sierra Theanu, just a team that is going to find a way to win, and they're going to battle and claw and scrap. And that's what Coach Yo has made this program. And you're right. I think they were a little upset they didn't get to host.
Yeah.
I think they were a little upset that they had to go on the road and play a Baylor team that has been very good all year, right? The second best team in the Big 12. But I think sometimes having to play Ole Miss it's a hard battle because of the way that they play. We talk about it this time of year, styles make fights, and Ole Miss will just physically be aggressive with you and push you and make you have to play through their toughness. And Baylor could not do that yesterday.
Well, and they also held Baylor just 2 of 15 from behind the 3-point line. So they ran them off the three. They didn't give them those open looks. They couldn't get players like Sarah Andrews open to get good, solid threes. And Ole Miss also wins the battle on the glass 40-37. We just said it a few moments ago. As Pat Summitt said many years ago, championships are won with rebounding, and they did that, and they advance. Okay, let's bounce down. We're going to stay on the left side of the bracket, and that would be Spokane 4. And it took an extra 5 minutes. If you don't need 40, then let's try 45. And it was the pit of Wildcats versus Wildcats. Kansas State, another team in the top 15, top 20 pretty much all season. Again, like Ole Miss, thought they were going to maybe get a chance to host. Didn't happen, had to go on the road. They go to Kentucky. Kenny Brooks in his first year there in Lexington. They get a 4 seed. They advance. He's got, I think, one of the best point guards in the nation with Georgia Amore. It took overtime, and this Kansas State team gets out with a 1-point win. It was... The stat sheet was flipped upside down, because if you would have told me, Matthew, that a team got 19 offensive rebounds and lost by 1 in overtime, I would have told you that you were crazy. But that's what happened to Kentucky. So give credit. When they needed it, Kansas State hit shots. Tamyra Poindexter knocked down, I believe, 8 threes. She went 8 of 7 from behind the 3-point line for 24 points. But this Kansas State team is still dancing, and they're more than likely going to be playing USC in the Sweet 16.
So to your point, you can outdo 19 offensive rebounds if you make 14 threes.
There you go.
And I think credit Kansas State, and Kenny Brooks said this in his postgame press conference. With Ayoka Lee back in the lineup, that's a 2 or 3 seed. And I think he's right. Yeah. Like, with Ayoka Lee in their roster, on their team, playing minutes. And again, she played 28 minutes, which I think you obviously know better. This is a team you cover a lot. Has to be her most minutes in a long time.
I think that might be the most all season. There was very few games where she played north of 25.
And she had 16 points. She had 9 boards. But what she did was the gravity she created, I think, 3 or 4 of those threes for Poindexter.
Yep.
And I think that's where you have to give credit to this Kansas. And why I think this Kansas State team doesn't not have a chance to keep winning is because of the fact that with her in the lineup, they are much better than their seed shows. Mm-hmm. With her healthy, playing another week off. Right now they get to take a break. They don't play again, I think, till they'll be Friday or Saturday. Get her some rest. And again, they did a really good job. You saw she played in about 3 to 4 minute spurts. She'd get a couple minutes break. She'd go back, and I think she played the entire overtime. That's probably the most minutes she played in a row the whole game, was that entire 5-minute overtime and late in the fourth quarter. But when they got that little bit of extra from her, they got a really good performance out of Poindexter, a really good performance out of Serena Sundell. That's what it takes. And again, Kentucky was 1 bounce of the ball away because of the way the ball hit the rim on Amore's shot that missed. If that ball bounces slightly differently, Kentucky probably wins this game because that shot probably goes in. And I think this is a game that's one of those all-time greats. Like, I think we can talk about it like in our staff and amongst us, like we were all so excited the way this game went, like back and forth, punch to counter punch, like every possession you were on your edge of your seat. It was such a high quality basketball game. This is what you want in March Madness. You want a game like this. And I think, again, somebody has to lose a game like this. And credit to Kansas State. They played their butts off. They hit big shots. Kentucky did some things defensively that again, you and I would sort of agree weren't the best things for what they had to do, but you have to sometimes live with certain things. And Kentucky was not willing to live with Ayoka Lee getting hot. It allowed Poindexter to hit open shots on the perimeter. And that's what ended up winning Kansas State the game, right? If she misses one of those 8 threes she made, they probably lose. But credit to them. They went on the road in overtime and won a very hard game. And like I said, they're underseeded with Ayoka Lee back in the lineup. Now they're probably going to have to play a 1 seed in the next round in the Sweet 16. We'll see how that goes. But a credit to them and a credit for winning that game in what was probably one of the best games of the season.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I think it was elite performances on both sides. And unfortunately, as you mentioned, we all know this. There's one team, one set of players that gets to end their season this year in exuberation. Everyone else feels terrible. and that sucks. And so it sucks to be able to for us to watch the career of Georgia Amore end, who we've all been fans of and high respect for what she did at Virginia Tech and this first year at Kentucky with Kenny Brooks. You know that program will just continue to rise. Okay, let's go over to Birmingham 3, where we had another 4-5 matchup, and that was Tennessee at Ohio State. I'll run you the numbers. It was an 82-67 win for the Lady Vols. They had 17 more field goal attempts than Ohio State. They caused 23 Buckeye turnovers, and they converted that into 37 points. Kim Caldwell, year one, they keep the streak alive, not only to be in the NCAA tournament, but this is a decisive win, and they are into the Sweet 16. The Lady Vols may be peaking at the right time that they need them to in March Madness.
So our good friend Mitchell Northam, he and another friend of his, Mia O'Brien, they have another podcast, and they call her Killa Kim. Well, she was Killa Kim yesterday because they and Ohio State, Tennessee and Ohio State have very similar styles, right? They press, they're going to get up in you, they're athletic. But I think if you look at it, the style of having all this rotating bodies and not playing all these minutes, I think that helps Tennessee when you play this way. They still had 2 players with 30 minutes. They still found a way to take 71 shots. What does she talk about? They want to get 20 extra possessions a game than their opponent. Well, they took 17 more shots. So they probably got those extra 20 possessions between the offensive rebounds and the turnovers that they forced. And they just outplayed Ohio State. They outplayed them on their home floor. They made them uncomfortable. They forced them into 23 turnovers, and they hit 10 threes. That's what they want to do. That is Tennessee's game plan. And the thing with their style, they can beat anybody because it's so unique.
Yes.
Because it's not consistent of, hey, you're going to play this 6 people, and then you have to deal with this couple people off the bench, and this is sort of no, they're playing everybody. They have 11 people played yesterday. 3 of them only played 3 to 9 minutes, but then you have 13, 21, and 30 coming off the bench.
Yeah.
Malaysia Cooper was their leading scorer. She played 30 minutes, scored 90 points off the bench. That's how this team is. And that's why I think they are a team that can play with anybody because of the style, because of their rotations, and just they play with this energy. And Kim Caldwell has this good energy that they've got them playing with. And I think, again, they have to play a 1 seed, so it's not like it's easy going forward, but credit to her in her first year for getting them to the Sweet 16 and continuing this program that has such a storied history, continuing that forward in her first season.
Well, more than likely, they're going to get Texas, who plays Illinois today. We'll talk about some of those games that are happening here on Monday. But just for going back to the chaos concept, because I think if you think back to the game of which they beat UConn in Knoxville, that was it. There were moments where you are living 40 minutes uncomfortable, and you can weather some of that, but the chaos comes in waves, and then you just have to figure out a way to survive. UConn couldn't do it, and I think that's what happened to Ohio State yesterday. I mean, they had 8 points in the fourth quarter. I mean, if you want to make a run and get yourself back in a game, you can't score 8 points in the fourth, and that's what happened to Ohio State.
And I think that's a tired legs factor, right? You're having to constantly be pressed, constantly bring the ball up against a team that is playing 8 to 11 players in a rotation. Your body's going to get tired. Plus, also, Ohio State presses themselves. So you're having to not only break a press, but then go and press yourself. You're going to eventually wear down. And if you don't have consistent bodies changing, and again, you saw that statistic on the TV screen in their first round game, they subbed almost as much as a hockey game. It feels like a hockey team you're playing when you play against Tennessee. But that helps you balance. And again, we talk about, I think it doesn't get talked about enough, these quick turnarounds from your first game to your second game. You're playing on a day rest, you're practicing in between, you're watching film, you have to get prepared. The legs get tired. The legs are going to be, and especially when you're a team that presses all the time, you're constantly having to deal with this stuff. It's emotion. It's as much physical and mental. And sometimes the legs give out on you late in the game, even at home.
Well, and the other part, as you said, when you're battling and playing that way, but you expend so much energy to get yourself back into a game and out of a hole. And I think that's what happened to Ohio State. They got down, and then you just work so hard to get back. You don't have anything at the end. Tennessee absolutely had a full tank of gas when they got to the end. Okay, there's more games to be played today. We need to keep an eye on those. We need to talk about who is going to punch these last tickets to the Sweet 16 when we come back in just a moment. Hi, everybody. Missy Heidrick. Welcome back to Locked On Women's Basketball. Matthew Walter is here today. And while we have the majority of the tickets have been punched for the NCAA tournament into the Sweet 16 that begins this coming weekend, there are games to be played today. Currently going on right now, it is just after noon, my time central. Michigan State and NC State. You've got Illinois and Texas that are going to tip at 1 o'clock Central Time. Then one I think is very interesting to a lot of folks in Norman, Oklahoma. Iowa, as the 6th seed, will play Oklahoma. That's 3 p.m. Central. Then we've got that the fourth 5-4 game as the seeds held. Alabama at Maryland. Florida State is going to take on LSU in that 6-3 seed. In the Birmingham 2, one game that I am very, very interested in that starts at 6 o'clock Central, West Virginia as a 6th seed at North Carolina in Chapel Hill. And then two big ones with the two big dogs ultimately in the Spokane 4. You've got South Dakota State, the Jackrabbits as a 10 seed. They will get UConn tonight. And then Mississippi State as the 9, taking on the number 1 seed in Spokane 4 in USC. What stands out to you today, my friend? What are you keeping your eye on?
I think it's all three of these 3-6 matchups. And we talked about them. Two of them are good. I think we have a chance to have 2 upsets. And I think Oklahoma and Iowa will be interesting because Iowa got to roll over Murray State when Murray State's best player got hurt early in the third quarter, and it sort of got out of hand. And Oklahoma had to play a very good Florida Gulf Coast team that shoots a lot of threes and plays fast. But this is a game that I could see being up and down, offensive minded, right? Iowa's got Lucy Olsen. They play quick. They have all these sort of scores. And Oklahoma, you know it. They're going to pass the ball. They shoot a lot of threes. And they have, oh, by the way, one of the best post players in the country in Reagan Beers. Should be a really fascinating matchup. I think with Beers on the inside, Oklahoma should have the advantage and should be able to score inside a little bit easier against not as physical of post players that Iowa has. But it's going to, again, Iowa plays with a lot of good offense. They shot the ball really well in Murray State. They're going to be coming in in that first round, coming in with confidence. So I think it should be a really good game coming up at 3 o'clock Central Time, 4 o'clock Eastern Time, 1 o'clock on the West Coast.
We hit them all. We hit all of the time zones. And just as another layer, just so everyone knows, you'll hear a lot about it, but Jenny Baranchik, used to be Jenny Lillis, an All-American at Iowa, played for Lisa Bluter and Jan Jensen. So you have that dynamic there of 2 solid people on the sidelines for that game and a lot of interesting storylines, but Iowa connections too.
Yeah, and I think if you move on to the next one between LSU and Florida State, right? The question everyone asked coming in the tournament about LSU, how healthy are Flau'jae Johnson and Anissa Morrow?
Yes.
Well, they both started. They both played 25 and 22 minutes against San Diego State. They won that game by 60 points. But now you're asking them to play a very different monster in Florida State, the best scoring offense in the country.
Yeah.
Florida State with Tanaya Latson and Michaela Timpson. I think they match up well with LSU.
Mm-hmm.
I think they could very easily win this game because of their ability to score the basketball, and they have so many weapons offensively. And again, yes, Flau'jae and Anissa Morrow played, but how truly healthy are they? Quick turnaround, 48 hours later. Yes, they played sub 30 minutes because they won by a lot, but will that be enough? And I know it's at home, but Florida State has won some big games on the road this year. I could see Tanaya Latson, Michaela Timpson picking up some steam and pulling this upset. We haven't seen a really big upset yet. This is one of the ones that I wouldn't be surprised if it happens.
Well, and I would also make a point. I feel like for LSU, they don't go super deep.
Yeah.
So if you're dealing with fatigue, if you're dealing with foul trouble that, with Latson trying to keep her contained, she can draw fouls in a quick hurry. I mean, she can string them together, not only get herself to the line but create just sort of her own chaos with the ball in her hand. That can be tough for LSU to be able to manage.
Yeah, and this one should be fun. I know we don't talk a lot about gambling in this podcast, but the total is 170 points.
Oh,
so there should be some offense.
Oh,
there should be some fireworks in this game between these two teams. So if nothing else, watch for what should be a very high-scoring battle between two of the best offensive teams in the country.
No doubt. Okay. Let's stay on the East Coast. Let's look at that last 6-3 matchup that comes out of the Birmingham 2 bracket. West Virginia as a 6 seed, North Carolina as a 3. This is played in Chapel Hill. I have been bullish about West Virginia all season. I think what Mark Kellogg has done there has been fantastic. I am the card-carrying president of the JJ Quinterly fan club. I think she's fantastic. And I think West Virginia could go into Chapel Hill, and I think they can get what they couldn't get done last year and get to the Sweet 16.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. And I think, again, we don't talk about gambling. The odds makers agree because West Virginia is the favorite in this game. And I think the style, again, we talk about styles make fights.
Yeah.
West Virginia's style is not something that everyone is used to. I don't think we would agree. Not many teams in the ACC are going to press you like West Virginia does.
No.
And I don't know if North Carolina is ready for that. Now, Courtney Bangerhart's a phenomenal coach. She's going to get her team prepared, but I just don't know if UNC has enough of the guards that can handle the pressure and are athletic enough to deal with what West Virginia is going to throw at you. West Virginia, their one downside, they're not the best offense in the country, but if they can force turnovers, which we know that's their thing, that's what they want to do. They're really good defensively. They're going to get up in your shorts. Can they make North Carolina uncomfortable enough, force enough turnovers, and score in transition? And we talked about a little before this show. West Virginia has a star. JJ Quinterly is a star. UNC doesn't really have that one star player. Like Alyssa Utsby is really good, but is she the kind of player that is going to put the team on her back in a game like this when it's late, when they need to make a big play? I haven't really seen that from her, and that's her way of playing. She's a really good glue player. She's a really good energy player, but she's not the kind of team that's going to put the team on her back and say, I'm going to win us this game and get us to the Sweet 16. It should be a really fascinating matchup. It's one of those games I really think is going to be a coin flip and going to come down to who can make a couple of those little extra plays late in the game when it matters most.
No, I would agree with you. And I think the thing about West Virginia is that all season they've just turned people over, and it's kind of the same idea with what we were talking about before in terms of just making you miserable, making you uncomfortable. West Virginia can do that, and they have the capacity to be able to make North Carolina miserable even on their home court. All right, my friend, we have dissected, we have predicted, and there are games to be played, and these last dance tickets are going to be punched. I want to thank you for coming on here and talking about all things in this first weekend of the NCAA Women's Tournament. So much more to come. Where does everybody find you as this tournament progresses?
You can find me on X at MatthewWalter96. There's going to be a lot of random tweets about junior college women's basketball in the state of California. You can come for those and stay for what will be an exciting season covering the Valkyries this upcoming year, and should be a lot of fun this weekend and next weekend in the round of 32 and the Sweet 16 and Elite 8.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Well, you can find me at Missy Heidrick on X, formerly known as Twitter. Go see us at thenexthoops.com. All the coverage that you need. Come back here to this podcast all week. We've got you covered with everything going on in the tournament and in women's basketball. Have a great day, everybody. I hope your bracket is still alive. If not, no worries, because there is a host of millions out there who have watched their brackets go up in flames. Have a great Monday, everybody.